Hello, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Milestones. This one is very, very near and dear to my heart because Kate is very near and dear to my heart, which I'll share a little bit more about later. But we are going to be talking about all things postpartum mental health, specifically focusing on postpartum anxiety, intrusive thoughts, identity loss, and motherhood. And I am just super excited to get into this one. So this is Kate Borsato. Thank you so much for being here with us. Kate is a mental health therapist, entrepreneur, and mom of two. For those of you that don't know her, she has over a decade of experience supporting moms in therapy and through online support and education. Kate, I'm going to turn it over to you to just tell us a little bit about yourself quickly, and then we'll get into it.
Amazing. Thank you, Casey. I'm so happy to see you. It's been a while since we've connected directly, so this is so lovely. Thanks for having me. So, yeah, I am on the far west coast of Canada with my kiddos. My girls are, gosh, they're almost 10 and 11 now, which is wild. I think when Casey and I first connected, they were babies, probably still.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I work as a mental health therapist and I specialize in perinatal mental health and supporting moms in general. So perinatal is often thought of as like the first couple years of motherhood, but really I'm here for moms through all of it. As we'll talk about today, some of those struggles and challenges just sort of keep going. And so it's not just the early years, it's the whole transition. And I'm just really excited to talk about anxiety. I know Casey and I relate big time on this topic, and I'm excited to share lots of tips and support for you all today. Thank you.
Yeah. I love it. Let's do it. Let's get right into it. So prior to this episode, I actually shared another episode about my experience with postpartum anxiety and kind of just really like the honest, what it was like for me in those early days and how I learned to manage it and therapy and all of those things. But I feel like a great starting point for us would really be to just talk about like postpartum anxiety in general, specifically to the narrative that, at least in my experience, I received kind of often, which is along the vein of like, well, you're mom now, like, welcome to motherhood. We all worry. And like, I think what was really hard for me when I was in it and didn't even realize that I had postpartum anxiety at that like initial stage was feeling like maybe this really is just my norm now. And I think one of the most powerful things that I learned from you early on was differentiating between normal motherhood worrying, because obviously it's going to be there, right? And then what that line is where it's like, okay, maybe we need to really think about how this is impacting you and all of that sort of stuff. So I would love to start there. If you can just kind of share how you help moms figure that out.
Yes, perfect place to start. And something that I'm pretty vocal about, sometimes I'll share online quite directly, anxiety isn't normal. And I know sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. And I've had comments like, well, how could you say that? How could you say it's not normal? And I say that with so much compassion and love of like, it's not normal to be suffering like this. And therefore, let's get you some help, right? It's not judgmental. It's not saying you're doing anything wrong. It's coming from a loving place of like, this is not normal to suffer. And so just kind of want to wrap that around our entire conversation today. If you ever feel like, this is resonating deeply, it's not to shame or to make you feel like you're doing anything wrong. It's like, no, this just means that you could be feeling better and you deserve support. I think the challenge is that we use this word anxiety to describe a feeling that all humans feel. It's almost like we need more words, right? Because of course we feel worry and we feel scared and we feel anxious about things. And that is a normal and appropriate feeling to have from time to time. So even before we have kids, we feel anxious about things like tests or traveling or like change, right? Like it's naturally going to create this feeling of discomfort and anxiety. And so, of course, when we have kids, it's brand new. There's so much unknown. Whenever we're facing an unknown situation, it's like breeding ground for anxiety because anxiety thrives off not knowing. And so all of that is normal, okay, to feel some of it. There is a line where those feelings and the stress and the disruption become so big that it starts to take away from your life. So it starts to become a problem. So the most simple statement I like to share is, anxiety becomes a problem when it causes a problem. Like it's such a simple, basic statement, but how are intrusive thoughts causing a problem in your life? How is ruminating or thinking, in circles all night long or perfectionism, like how is that actually impacting your life in a way that's problematic? because it's not inherently bad, which we'll talk about a bit later. Having an intrusive thought isn't actually bad. It's the impact that it has on you that causes the problem. So that's kind of the line that as a therapist or a provider that I'm listening for. Like, is this getting in the way of how you want to parent, how you want to feel, like how life is going in general? That's when it becomes an issue. Does that
Yeah.
resonate, Casey? Does that make sense?
It totally does. Yeah, and I think that that is something that is really hard for you to recognize when you're in it. Like, even again, like, not to keep taking it back to me, but like when I was in it, it wasn't just that I was feeling anxious. It wasn't just that I was having those intrusive thoughts. It was that I was literally like paralyzed with fear because I was like, the intrusive thoughts were so real and they were so vivid. And I was like, I love what you just said about anxiety feeding off of the not knowing, because I feel like for me, that was such a big part of it. Was I was like, I need to control every single piece of what I can to keep her safe, because that was the only way that I could like manage my intrusive thoughts. And so my
Mhm.
ability to function, my relationship with Jay, my relationship with everything was impacted. And it still floors me that no one caught it. Like, no one thought it was weird. No one was like, hey, Case, like, do you feel like yourself? Like, looking back on that time. But I also kept a lot of it just in here, like just in my gut, in my head, like all of those things. And
Yes.
I think part of what's really hard is that postpartum anxiety specifically is so not really screened for. Like, that 6-week checkup when you go in and you fill out that paperwork, and at least in my experience, it was always focused on postpartum depression, which of course is important, but like filling that questionnaire out, I'll never forget looking at it and it being like, do you want to hurt yourself or your baby? And I was like, oh my God, no, quite the opposite. I'm like afraid to leave our bedroom because I'm
Exactly.
so scared that something is going to happen, But like, nobody flagged that. There was no question that made me feel like, oh, maybe this is weird, or maybe I shouldn't be feeling like this?
No, exactly. Nobody asked, like, do you sit up all night Googling symptoms? Are you staring at your sleeping baby, wondering if they're dead? Are you like all these questions that we need to talk about? I did actually just went through this questionnaire recently with somebody, and it's like the number of caveats I give as I'm going through it. One of the questions, actually, several of the questions say things like, are you anxious or worried for no good reason? Like, that's what the question is. And it's like, well, if that's the point, is you don't know if this is a good reason or not, or your anxiety makes you think it is a good reason. Like, I'm going to stay up all night and stare at my infant, and that feels totally reasonable. Like when you're
Totally.
struggling with anxiety. So you're totally right that it gets missed all the time. And I also think that the way anxiety shows up sometimes looks like just being a really good on top of it mom. And especially now with social media and all of this like information that we have, it kind of just feels like you're doing a really thorough, good job if you keep tracking naps or feeding or uh, like all of the things that we could monitor. Or if you read another book or listen to that extra podcast, it's like this kind of more. I've got to be good at this. I can't miss anything. It kind of just looks like good parenting sometimes. And it's really slippery. And all of a sudden, you just feel overwhelmed by everything. You don't feel any more in control, as you probably noticed. It doesn't
Hmm.
really work, all of those strategies. You're still kind of reeling inside. So,
Totally.
yeah, there's so much to explore today.
When we're talking about postpartum anxiety and intrusive thoughts, I guess my first question would be, do you find that they are often happening together simultaneously? Like, when one is present, most of the time the other is. And from there, I'd love for us to talk about like what an intrusive thought really is, because I think that that is something that I really didn't understand.
Hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I think to back it up, maybe even one step, postpartum anxiety can look like a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different symptoms that might fall under that umbrella. And intrusive thoughts is one of those. It's a big one, and so we can definitely spend lots of time today talking about that. But anxiety can look like chronic worrying. It can look like having conversations in your mind that you haven't had yet, or replaying things that have happened. It can look like not being able to sleep, even though everyone else is sleeping, including your baby, and you're just like wired and you can't fall asleep. It can look like body sensations or symptoms, discomfort, body pain, headaches, stomach issues. So, like, it can look so different for everyone. It can also look like irritability and rage. So, sometimes if you're feeling just like on edge and almost like you're an injured animal, where like if anybody comes near you, you're just going to bite their face off. Like, sometimes that's how anxiety shows up as well. And so, in terms of intrusive thoughts. If you have intrusive thoughts, these are basically thoughts that just like burst into your mind. They could be like images, movie scenes, or they could be like a literal word based thought. These are not always about anxiety because like all humans have intrusive thoughts. Everybody has like weird, junky, random thoughts, every single person. And so that's why if people start talking about this, like you'll still see reels or TikToks where people are like driving and then they're like, why did I just think about doing this all of a sudden? And everyone's like, oh my God, I think that too. Do I have anxiety? And it's like, no, it's just what brains do. Brains do weird shit all the time. However, sometimes it gets so out of control and scary and it's what meaning we add to the thoughts. So what often happens for moms with little ones, first of all, like just having a baby and being pregnant is a risk factor for anxiety. Like with nothing else, it's a risk factor. Your brain is hardwired to be like very stressed and hypervigilant to take care of your baby. So like we're already all leaning toward anxiety just as we're wired to keep our little kiddos alive. It kind of makes sense. So
Yeah.
intrusive thoughts are going to be way more common, way more like awful when we have little kids, just because of how our brains are wired. So again, like most people have intrusive thoughts, but sometimes the impact of those thoughts is so severe. And when that's the case, it's usually anxiety.
Got it. I think too, what something that has stuck with me for years, that when you and I first connected and I talked to you about my intrusive thoughts and you had shared with me, and I want to tie this into the postpartum rage too, because that is something that I have never admitted, I don't think, on social media, even though I've been very open about my experience with postpartum anxiety and just anxiety in general and intrusive thoughts and all those things. I still hold a lot of shame around the struggle I had with rage when my anxiety was really bad. And it was things that I was like, I knew, like, after the moment, I would be like, "Why are you so, like, what was that?" Like, and the shame that comes with that is, like, it still feels intense, and I think with intrusive thoughts too, I think a lot of the times a big part of why moms are not seeking help actively for things like intrusive thoughts or things like rage that are kind of part of a bigger group of things is because of that shame, that fear that even I remember you distinctly saying so often, moms will avoid sharing their intrusive thoughts for fear of like being reported or for fear
Mhm.
of like a therapist taking it out of context or whatever and thinking they're actually going to follow through with an intrusive thought they
Yes,
had or something like that. And I think that that is a huge part of this conversation that would be so beneficial for someone out there to hear your
100%.
perspective as someone with advanced training in perinatal mental health and all of that, like why finding a specialist can be so powerful if you can, who understands all those intricacies and really can help you make
Yeah.
sense of what you're navigating, you know?
Okay, let's talk a bit more about intrusive thoughts specifically, and then I want to talk about the rage piece that you shared because I think that's so important and just so grateful for you for naming that because the number of people listening who are going to feel so much less alone and less shamey because you shared that is really big. So let me talk a bit more about intrusive thoughts because I think naming the types of things that can come up for people is helpful. And as when I'm working with clients, I often am the first to say, like, sometimes moms think about these things because it's really hard to just offer up the stuff that comes up in your head. So the first thing I often say is like your mind is endlessly creative and it's honestly endless. The types of intrusive thoughts we could have endless. And so I often teach different categories, but just know that if your thoughts don't fall in those categories, that's also totally normal. These are just sort of like common buckets that they fall into. So sometimes people have intrusive thoughts about like injuries, accidents, sicknesses, like happening to them or to their kids. So, I've had this a lot. Like I go swimming, I still do. I go swimming or we go to the lake or the ocean and I just start imagining my kids drowning or like awful things happening. It's just like boom, enters your mind. So that would be more of like an accident, dog attacks, car accidents, things like that.
That's where
People
mine
also
always fell,
okay. Yeah,
always.
okay. Accidents,
I would
yes.
literally have images, and I don't wanna put images into anyone's head because it was not great, but I would literally have images of Audrey, my oldest, literally being 16, getting into a car accident, and, like, I wasn't there, I couldn't help her, or, like, walking past our banister, would picture, like, me turning the wrong way quickly and, like, hitting her head on the banister, or, like, walking past the stairs on the balcony, picturing, like, what if I tripped and she fell? And it was like, it was so real. Like, it was so real. So anyway,
Yes.
that's where mine fell
No,
to.
it's good, and I think, like, yes, obviously, sometimes the content that we're talking about today might be hard for people to hear, and also, I believe in saying these things out loud because so many people have these things in their heads anyway. Um, it's okay, right? So, don't worry that you're planting seeds. I think it's okay.
Okay.
I think it's important to give examples because people will be like, "Oh my gosh, I've had that one too," and I wouldn't dare whisper that to anyone. The other thing is like sometimes these thoughts are totally random, and then sometimes people will be like, "Well, that thing did actually happen." So, and we'll talk about like strategies to deal with intrusive thoughts. Let's like mentally pin that because I definitely want people to
Okay.
leave with like concrete things. Because often what we hear is like, just tell your brain that that's nonsense, that'll never happen. And then it's like, well, what if that thing did happen? Like, what about those people who have experienced in like a miscarriage or loss or accidents? Like my daughter has been attacked by a dog. And so when I have intrusive thoughts about a dog attack, it's like, I can't just tell my brain, well, that's an intrusive thought. That's ridiculous. Cause it's like, well, no, that did happen. And
Yeah.
somebody's getting in a car accident and these things are happening to somebody. And so why not me?
Mhm.
Right. It's like our anxiety brain just thinks like you can't shut that part of your brain up. So there's a way to approach this that's actually way more effective that people are not teaching. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So an important piece here too, though, is like sometimes intrusive thoughts aren't just about your kids. Mine were often and still are about me. I'm like, I'm going to close my eyes in the shower and open them, and there's going to be like a murderer standing in front of my face. Like, imprint of horror movies from being a teenager or like a young kid is just deep in there. And these images pop up often. So sometimes it's about your own personal safety. You know, women growing up feeling like perpetually unsafe and victimized. It's like this shit comes back up. And so
Mhm.
sometimes it's based in real trauma and sometimes it's just absolutely nonsense. And so it's not one or the other, but we often hear online how like ridiculous intrusive thoughts are, and it's like no, sometimes they're totally real things that have happened, but it's still the mechanism is still operating in the same way and the way we deal with it is still the same way. So let me just can I speak to some of the other tricky
Yeah,
intrusive thoughts? Yeah.
please do.
Okay. So sometimes I would say like the level up, like these are getting like progressively harder to sit with and more shamey. So the next level is around thoughts of like you harming somebody else. So, you know, sometimes moms will say, like, I walk past the kitchen and there's like the knife block, and I just imagine grabbing a knife and stabbing myself or cutting somebody's arm off or things that are like truly horrifying.
Mhm.
And if you're hearing this right now and you're like, "Fuck, that's so horrifying," it's like, yeah, it is. And you didn't choose to have that thought. It doesn't mean anything about you that you like secretly want to do these things. It is literally your threat brain scanning for every potential threat, even ones that are like out to lunch because it wants you to be really safe. And so that's why these things kind of pop up sometimes. So there's, you know, sometimes moms have thoughts about inappropriately touching their child. I used to feel, talk about rage, this is the connection. I mean, when my kids were babies, sometimes I would get so angry and overwhelmed, and I'd have this thought of like, what if I just like tossed my child, like threw her across the room? And then I have this thought and I'm like, what is wrong with me? It's so scary, but it
Mhm.
happens. And so the thing is, from my experience as a therapist, but also just from all the research that I've done, it's all kind of equal. It's not like people who have violent, intrusive thoughts are just like outlying weirdos. They're not. It's as common as a thought about your kid drowning or a dog attack or falling down the stairs. So I just want everyone to hear that and know that like the content of your thoughts is literally meaningless. It means nothing about you. It doesn't reveal anything about you. It's a random junk thought. It's like a pop-up advertisement. And sometimes it's like our trauma, sometimes it's what we've been exposed to through our lives that makes these things pop up, but it's not your fault and you didn't ask for it.
Yeah. I feel like that is so powerful for people to hear because I think, again, there is obviously hard to talk about, right? Like if it's hard for you to hear this as a listener, imagine how it feels for someone who's navigating it. And like, you don't want to feel that way. Like you would do anything to not have that thought pop up and pop up again and again, or be a path that you go down in your mind. So before we go to postpartum rage, do you feel now is a good time to talk about some of those strategies on what people can do when those
Hmm.
intrusive thoughts pop up to kind of bring yourself back down to
Yeah,
a baseline?
for sure. So I think sometimes the strategy is also knowing like what not to do. And one of the biggest problems or the problematic ways that we handle anxious, intrusive thoughts is what keeps them going. So mistake number one, we usually read into them. We make meaning out of them. So the whole concept here is like engaging with, like, how are we relating to our thoughts? Are we're making meaning out of them? For example, like, why would I think that? Like, what does this mean about me? Am I secretly like a psycho? Am I a risk to my child? Am I secretly like wanting to do that weird thing? Like, it's so when we do that, we're acting as if that thought is meaningful, and it's not. So if you took one thing away from this whole discussion, it's that we need to learn to like unhook, not engage with our thoughts, not act as if they mean literally anything. Remind me, Casey, about how to talk about the difference between knowing like when is this actually a dangerous thought versus not, because this always comes up for people, like, how do I know if I am at risk? So we want to stop engaging. So instead of being like, why did I think about grabbing that knife? Like, am I a threat? Should I put the knife block away? Should I make sure Jay carries the baby down the stairs so I don't accidentally fall and hit their head on the banister? Once we start doing that, like if we shape shift around our scary thoughts, it's like throwing gasoline on the fire. Okay. So maybe we can even like work with an example. Can you remember something that you did to like shape shift around your thoughts?
You know I can. Come on. I got a whole friggin' journal full of them. Okay,
Okay.
here's one. This is still something I actively have to navigate. Not giving weight to is one of my biggest intrusive thoughts that I still struggle with is actually about Jay and something happening to him at work. And it's funny, I can't say specifics, but you literally just made a connection for me about something that happened as a child to a family that we know and we're very close with in a work-related accident where unfortunately he ended up passing away. And I don't think I ever made that connection until literally like this second. So Kate, like again, you've changed my life like a million times over, but
Oh,
for me, like one of the biggest things that I have to do when I'm having that thought of like, okay, let me back up, because here's where a little bit of like OCD like tendencies would come into play for me is I would be like, I would picture something horrible happening to him at work. And then like maybe I would call him and like he didn't have service, so he wouldn't answer. And then I would be like, oh my God, here we go. And it would like start this whole thing where I would be like, I put that out into the universe. And now I need to like, you know, whatever, do something 10 times so that it doesn't happen. Or I need to like, and then it would start with this like perseveration. And I feel like for me, one of the hardest things to do was to stop giving meaning to it and literally like saying out loud to myself, like, Casey, stop. That is not happening. Even though it is a possibility, it's not happening right now. And if it happens, you will figure it out, but it's not
yes.
happening right this second. And like having to literally say that out loud to myself, I still do that where I have to be like, Casey, stop, like stop that right now. Stop that progression. It is really, it has been 5 years getting to that point, you know,
Oh, yeah.
but I don't know if
And
that
it
was
sounds
really the
like you have a
example you
good
were saying.
therapist because that is exactly how you want to approach it. I'm assuming that you learned that or you learned that somehow and
Yes.
it's
No, I learned it
brilliant.
in therapy. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's exactly it. So and this circles back to the idea of uncertainty and anxiety. And so essentially so Jay's at work, there's this uncertainty and the history is grounded in trauma that and also just real risk. Like obviously some people don't make it home from work and that is
totally.
a devastating reality. And if we try to tell our anxiety brain like, oh, that's never going to happen, it's fine. It doesn't work because it happened to somebody and it's going to happen
Hmm.
to somebody else. And so why not me, right? And it's super unsettling. And so that's the unknown. And anxiety brain wants to eliminate the unknown. So you're like, and that's what gets you to do all the things. I'm going to text him. Well, I didn't get that reassurance. Okay, what else am I going to do? I mean, I'm going to do my 10 other things that makes me feel better about what's going on, or I'm going to look up stats about this thing happening, or I'm going to
Hmm.
because so anxiety brain wants to search for things to like manage the risk, and it's never enough. And that's the trick. It's like once you realize, oh my gosh, I'm trying to get certainty, I'm trying to Google another article about SIDS stats, or I'm trying to, last time we went to Disneyland a few years ago and I was Googling like the percentage of like roller coaster or like deaths. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's not going to reduce the risk. It doesn't change anything. So all we can really do is work on accepting the risk like you are. Yeah, I hope this doesn't happen. That would be devastating. It might. I can't control that. So what do I do? Like it becomes about sort of like soothing yourself and accepting that this risk is there, but I can't fix it. And that sucks. Like I know everybody hearing that is probably like, I'm going to barf right now because nobody wants to accept the risks. But that is kind of the way out of this, is just facing the fact that like I can't control these things. We can anchor it in some more concrete examples too. Like I'll give one for me. One of my biggest ones, and I still have to fight this, is being home alone. Again, like I have this deep fear of like an intruder. And when my kids were little, we didn't have curtains and blinds on most of our windows upstairs. It would have been like a really easy fix to just do that, and I didn't. My partner used to travel as well for work, and so it would get dark at like 5:30, 6 p.m., and I would basically shut my house down because I didn't want to walk out in the kitchen and the bathrooms and everything. So everything would be like shut down and cleaned up, and I would basically hang out in like the bedrooms with my kids until it was bedtime, because I thought for sure if I walked out there, a murderer would be like staring through the window at me. And it's like, so I figured out how to shape shift around my fear to make me feel better. It doesn't change the risk of anything, and it
Mhm,
shrinks my life, right?
mhm.
So it doesn't work. And so much of what we do to deal with our intrusive thoughts, it doesn't actually change the risk. It just shrinks our lives, and actually it just makes your brain think that that's like a reasonable thing to do.
I love that. I feel like that connection is huge. Like, it
Aw.
doesn't change the risk. Like, it's so true though. Like those things are there and they're going to be there. Okay, so
Yes.
how do people know the difference between, okay, this is something I actually like, I need to get help for this, or this is dangerous, or like that kind of thing when it comes to
Yes.
intrusive
So
thoughts?
there's two things that come up because people are probably like, well, if I don't hook into the fear, what do I just like let it all go? We could come back to like the swimming example. If your intrusive thoughts are like your kids are going to drown, it doesn't mean you just say, no, they're not. I'm not dealing with that. I'm not worrying about this, and like throw your hands in the air. It's like, no, what would a reasonable person do for safety? Well, they would first put their kids in swimming lessons. They would put a life jacket on their kid. But like anything beyond that, anxiety owns. So there's a bit of like a check there. So it doesn't like to not hook into intrusive thoughts doesn't mean you just don't do anything and you're like a negligent parent. Like you still get to do some safety things. So that's always a bit of a fine line to find. But that question before, especially when people are having intrusive thoughts that are like violent, where they might harm their kids, and you hear me say like, it means nothing about you, it's fine. People always think like, well, what if it's not fine? What if I actually am a risk? How do I know? So this is a lot more simple than people might expect. But you ask yourself, if this thing actually happened, if I did play out that thought, does that make me feel good? Does that feel aligned with my values and how I see the world? Does it feel like, yeah, that's the right thing to go and get that knife and do that thing, or throw my child down the stairs? And it's ridiculous sounding, right? And like most people are like, oh my God, absolutely not. That is why I'm so disturbed by it. So if it's not in alignment with who you are and how you want things to go, then it is an anxiety thought. It has nothing to do with you being an actual risk. If on the other hand, you're like, yeah, that needs to happen, I'm going to do that thing, we're not talking about anxiety. We're talking about something totally different, something possibly like psychosis or something actually concerning. And you definitely need support with that right away. But
Mhm.
for the most part, people listening to this, you wouldn't be listening to this if you thought your thoughts were like a good idea. You're listening to this episode because you're like, oh my gosh, this is awful. This is horrifying. I need help.
Totally.
Does that
Totally.
distinguish it well enough? Or are there any other questions there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I feel like that's very, very helpful. And yeah, even just that quick check in, I think is so powerful and definitely something someone needs to hear. So, should we circle back to rage? Because I did not know that postpartum rage is not an actual diagnosis until right before we started recording this episode, because it is talked
Okay.
about like it is. And I think that it is, again, something that I still hold a lot of shame for. I punched a hole. I'm admitting something right now that I have only admitted to like one other person ever. I punched a hole in the wall. Literally, I don't even remember why. I think it was like, I think I was frustrated about maybe breastfeeding or something. I literally don't even know. I was so embarrassed by my behavior as soon as it was over. And like, I would say I would pat myself on the back for like putting the baby down in a safe spot and like knowing I was like about to flip my lid. I literally drove with the baby to Home Depot to get stuff to patch the wall and repaint before Jay got home because I was so mortified by my inability to like check that feeling and not act like that. And now that I'm out of that season, I'm like, I would never do that. I would never punch a hole.
Mm,
I've never punched anything in my life until that moment. Like
yeah.
it is wild to think about, but like it is still something that I harbor a lot of shame about because it's not me and I know it's not me, but it was such a real part of my early motherhood experience, and
Yeah.
I would just love to talk about that to
Yes.
yeah.
Let's get into it. And thank you for sharing that. And I just want to give like
Just
past
bearing it all
you,
today.
oh, yeah. I just want to give past you like a big hug. And I feel like I've heard this story before because this is not uncommon. And of course, nobody shares this. And there's so many layers to that. But I think, like, number one, for you and anybody listening resonating to kind of think back to that version of you with compassion and love, and like the first step to not feeling shame is not shaming yourself, and to think of it as like, what did past me need then? Like, what did she need? And you don't even have to answer that unless you feel like it right now, but like, do you feel like answering that question? Like, what do you think you
Yeah,
needed?
I think I needed help, but I needed support. I think with navigating like breastfeeding difficulties and like the feeding was such a struggle. And then, it's like, well, and then it would go into in my head, like, should I have done the tongue tie? Like all of those medical decision kind of things. And I think for me, I also at that point had zero ability to let Jay learn how to be a parent too because I needed to control it. Like he was not going to be the parent that I was. He was not going to do it the right way like I would have. So I just didn't let him try. And I think because of that, he was like, "Okay, like you just want to do it all. That's fine." And because I wasn't telling anyone what was going on inside of my brain when I was like in our bedroom for 3 months because I was scared if I left the bedroom something would happen to the baby. I think because I wasn't vocalizing those things, it was just like all piling onto each other. And I think what started as anxious thoughts and, intrusive thoughts kind of led to that period of rage because then it's like, then I'm like bitter at Jay for not just knowing what I needed or like knowing that I needed his help. Yeah, I think it
Hmm.
was all of it. I just think I
Oh, yeah.
needed, yeah,
Yes, yes, you did, and it's all connected. You can see how the anxiety and being in your room for 3 months, like, you were not just feeling a bit anxious, like, that is significant, and
totally.
you needed help, and you needed somebody to kind of see that and call it out. Like, it's really hard to ask for help when we're in that place. I think, like, we need to look at anger truly like an iceberg. We've probably all seen these graphics online, and anger is not usually like, well, there's different reasons for it, and we're gonna get into I would definitely wanna talk about, like, the very valid reasons for anger, especially, like, female rage that can come up around this time. Um, but sometimes anger is, like, the thing that we see, but underneath is fear. It's like unrealistic expectations. It's feeling alone. It's feeling like just like so scared that things are going to go wrong. It's like so many things underneath and it just blows up. And so when you noted that, yeah, postpartum rage isn't actually a diagnosis. I often say this isn't a thing. It's not like anxiety, depression, and rage. It's like we've got anxiety, we've got depression, there's like different anxiety disorders within that. There's other things, but postpartum rage isn't something that you are diagnosed with. Rage is an emotion. And again, if you kind of zoom out and look at that, it's like female rage is often pathologized and it has been historically as well. Like if you're a woman and you're angry, oh, you're probably mentally ill. And it's like, no, you're a woman who's angry because you're angry. And that is
Yeah.
so valid. Right. And sometimes it comes out in ways that seem like wild because you maybe haven't expressed it very much before, or, you punched a wall instead of a pillow. And it's like, it looks really intense, but maybe it's just like a valid emotion that needed to come out. And so I think first sort of looking at rage as like, I see it as like a flag and what's underneath, what else is going on. I think we need to really notice pathologizing women's rage and dismissing it as like an illness rather than, wow, what's going on with you, right? Like you all of a sudden have had kids and maybe you've given up a career that you've worked so hard for. You feel differently about your body, and society has all sorts of things to say about your body. You feel like you have to be perfect at being a mom. You feel like your infant's like life literally is depending on you. Like there is so much on you. So when you start to look at all that, it's like, yeah, no wonder you're fucking furious. And
It's like a pressure cooker,
yes,
a literal pressure. Yeah.
yes. So there's some really cool texts, like books about feminine rage that like maybe we can link or I can share and you can decide if you want to
Yeah,
share them or not. But
absolutely.
I think like no matter what, we need to listen to rage. Sometimes it's speaking to things that are really out of balance. Sometimes it's like, yeah, your anxiety has caused this situation that is like not sustainable, and for you it kind of erupted. And the cool thing is like sometimes when things erupt it becomes visible. Anger is visible and super uncomfortable for you. That do you feel like that was a bit of a wake up call for you when you did that?
God, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that I think for me, just the biggest thing that caused was like realizing that it was something that was going to be visible to Jay specifically. And I was like, how do I even explain to him? How do I even put words to what led to that without him thinking I'm an absolute lunatic? Like, because it was so outside of my character. And like, there was so much to it that I, at that point, still hadn't even named. Like, I didn't even know I had postpartum anxiety until a year postpartum when I watched some girl on Instagram sharing her story. And I was like, what? And then moving forward, I was able to put things into place to not have my other postpartum experiences be that way. But there was so much of it that I didn't know. I didn't know it wasn't normal. I didn't know that all of those things were tied together. I didn't know any of it. And I think for me in that
Yeah.
moment, it was a wake up call because I was like, oh my God, this is outside my character and I need to figure this out, you know?
Yes, exactly. And that's why I actually like anger as a therapist. I'm like, bring it on because number one, it grabs your attention or other people's attention, and especially for women. And so it helps you realize like, oh, this is not me. I don't want to be like this. So none of this is to say like just accept your anger and stay there, right? Like anger is a warning sign that we need something. Something needs to change. And so for you, it's like it was such a visible wake up call. It crossed the line of how you want to show up as a parent, as a
Mm-hmm.
human. And so it allowed you to then kind of take the next step. Sometimes anger is it's energizing. Like when we're depressed, we often struggle to take action and we feel stuck. Whereas when we feel like rage, it's an opportunity to be like, okay, what am I going to do now? And it usually drives actions.
Mm.
I don't want us to be afraid or like shut down our anger, but we definitely don't want to just like sit in it. We need to ask ourselves, like, what do I need here? What needs to change? Whether it's support, whether it's like outsourcing, letting things go. I don't know. There's a million different things, but like something needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Before we move on to this last piece, is there something else that you wanted to say? I made a note that anger for valid reasons and female rage. Is there
Mm.
something else you wanted to touch on with that? Or,
I think like, I mean, I briefly did, but I think I really just want to make space for valid kind of feminine rage that comes up, especially when we become mothers, where we're expected to kind of kill off parts of ourselves, happily abandon our careers, happily take on this like domestic role and be grateful for everything when that's actually really painful. And there's a lot of grief and there's a lot that can feel pretty awful about it, even if it's something we want and we chose and we like walked headfirst into. It's often really alarming, especially when you're used to being, you know, capable and you're high functioning. Like these women often struggle even more because, like you did, you kind of apply your same MO. Like, I'll just work harder and learn more and do better, and then I'll sort it out. And it's like, it doesn't work. So I just want to really like honor that intense anger and rage that can come up for women at this time. And just really be careful that we don't look at it like illness.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think another piece. Okay. So that's actually like the most perfect transition to this last piece that I really wanted to talk about, which was identity loss and then wrapping it up with some realistic nervous system regulation. But I think identity loss was also a huge part of my struggle headed into motherhood because I really, really wanted to be able to still do it all. I really wanted to work. I really wanted to honor those pieces of me. But when I did that, I felt like I was doing nothing well. Like there was nothing that I was doing the way that I wanted it to, which would then just make me feel worse and worse. And like when Aud was, what a wacko, when Aud was 6 weeks old, I signed up for like one of the most intense physical therapy certification courses you can like like, and I was like, I'll do it. It's going to be totally fine. And I had to drop out of it, which crushed me because I had spent all the money that I didn't get back. And I was like, I can't do anything well. I can't be the PT I want to be. I can't be the person I want to be for myself. I can barely find time to take a shower. I'm not exercising. Like I'm not being the mom that I want to be because I'm stressed about those other things. Like I'm not being the wife I want to be. It was
Yeah.
like the loss of it felt like the loss of literally who I was, like to my core. And I was like, I'm never going to be able to get back to that place. And if you're listening to this and you are in that right now, I just want you to know, I'm obviously not very much not a mental health therapist, but I just want you to know from that perspective, like it is coming back. Like I am getting it back. I am finding myself again. I have found in this newer season of my kids being a tiny bit older, like I have found that now all of a sudden, like I can read for 20 minutes before I go to bed at night because my kids are not waking up constantly, or I can fit in a 45-minute workout that makes me feel good because my kids can bike ride along with me now. And I think if I had been able to zoom out and realize that like, yes, that season felt really hard and like I had lost myself because I had and because it was really hard, but like it's going to change. Like that season, I don't know. And I said this to Kate before we got on here, but Kate has been like a beacon of light for me because her kids are about 5 years older than mine. And I feel like seeing you in stories, like, you know, the quote unquote getting your pink back is like something that I have looked at and been like, oh my God, it's really like you took up rollerblading again and you like
Mhm.
seeing you share those things that are just for you and not for your kids and not for anybody else. Like it has given me so much hope to be like, okay, I'm gonna like it's gonna ebb and flow. Things are gonna change. But I
Yes.
think that this is a really important thing for women to hear. And I love how you talk about identity loss and
Mm.
I would love to hear your perspective.
Yes. I mean, I would echo what you said there that to anybody listening feeling like, oh my gosh, when do I get to live again? When does it come back to me? It does. It 1,000,000% does. But I think the kind of takeaway is that you have to give yourself permission to take up space, and that opportunity for space gets a little bit bigger with time. Like now I don't even know where my oldest daughter is. Like, what changes is like mind blowing. But when my kids were little, I also was grieving. I was like, is this my life now? I could not see past what was currently happening. It felt like this was life forever. And that's really hard to face. And I didn't really have anybody saying like, no, no, this changes. This gets
Mm-hmm.
better. The more space will come. It's okay. But I think like there is a death and there is grief that happens when we become mothers. And that's not pessimistic, and that's not to like blame our kids for anything. It's just a huge change. It's a pivotal transition in a mother's life of like before kids and after kids. You are different. Everything is different. You know, I was with my mom recently and I'm noticing how she's still worried about us. She still wants us to be happy and thinks about us. It's like we will never not have part of ourselves occupied thinking and hoping our kids are okay. Like we're just different.
Uh-huh.
And I like the narrative too of like we don't need to go back to ourselves, our old bodies, our old lives. Like it's not ever going to be that. So there is also kind of like a rebirth of ourselves, but I think there's a bit of a death at the beginning. And some things we might bring back, but they're always going to look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. But at first, it does really feel like like you've given everything away. And some of that is just inevitable, especially if you have like multiple littles at the same time or higher needs kiddos. Like it's just everything does become about them. And that can be hard. But so the first piece is just knowing like it doesn't have to stay this way. But then the next is knowing it's on me to kind of bring it back to myself. Nobody's going to do that for you. Like nobody is going to create the space and be like, hey, you should go and find your joy again. That's annoying because it's like you really wish somebody would make space
Mm-hmm.
for you and carve it out for you. But but we really do have to accept that like this is kind of on me to figure out like what do I need? What lights me up again? For me, it started in super small ways. So it's like some tangible things that folks listening might think about is like no matter what stage you're in, what are you doing throughout the day that is just for you? Like and it could be like listening to music or what are you looking at? Like, are you even enjoying what you're putting on your body? Are you, I used to sit around coloring with my girls. They're only 16 months apart. So they're always sort of like in the same stage. And we would sit around coloring. And I remember at one point I was coloring like a Paw Patrol coloring books with like crappy felt pens that were half ruined and listening to some like kids bop awful music and I'm like what am I doing? Like those were opportunities for joy. So I got online right
Mhm.
away and I ordered some like adult coloring books and I put on my music and I lit my candle and I was like I am done. I am done being just like a servant camp counselor. Like no.
Mhm.
And little shifts like that, I had a box of beautiful felt pens that were like mommy's felt pens, like do not touch, and my adult coloring books. And it's like so silly and small, but I felt so much better about little things like that.
Kate,
Jump in.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm laughing because do you know what my most recent Amazon order was? It
Oh
was
my gosh, tell me.
markers, a set of 160 markers, mandala, is that how you say it? A mandala coloring book
Yes.
that is like a
Yes.
vintage design just for me. My girls were like, "Can I take a picture out of there?" I was like, "No, you sure can't. This is just for mommy."
Absolutely
I
not.
bought myself this easy watercolor, DIY watercolor because
Yay.
I was like, yes, I was like, I love to color with them, but like I can color something that brings me joy instead of coloring Paw Patrol or
Yes.
dinosaur or and
Exactly.
I know it sounds silly, but I don't think it is at all. I feel like it's those little things that then you build on that and you have one more
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly. And it's not about like nobody listening. Don't take away that like, oh, Kate and Casey were like, oh, just color your own book and you'll be happier. It's like, no, that is a drop in the ocean. But I think it's literally an opportunity for joy. I think of like your senses, what you see, what you wear, what you smell, what you hear, what you taste. All of these are opportunities for joy. Okay. And I think what happens in these early years is we just like forget about our own joy, our own pleasure, right? We make these like beautiful little plates of food for our kids and then we eat snacks and like crumbs, or we eat
Mhm.
crusts and crumbs and like whatever. No, like we need to make beautiful little things for ourselves. Like even if it's a coffee drink that you actually like in the morning instead of just like chugging mediocre coffee, right? It's like small little
Mhm.
things. So not only is it's pleasure and joy in the moment, but you're also signaling to yourself like I matter. I am on the list as well. You're also signaling to your whole family that I don't work for you all. Like I am here to be part of this system, but like I'm also someone who deserves something, right? I used to make sure to like go to the coffee shop that I wanted to go to, like small things that were just almost like gestures of putting myself back on the radar. So wherever you're at for those listening, like just think of what is reasonable for you. You might hear people going on like girls' weekends and date nights, and it's like that's not necessarily practical or reasonable, and it doesn't have to be. Like you might be with your kids for years. And so we need
Mhm.
to figure out self care and like realistic strategies that you can do when they're with you.
And I think too, like a big piece of it is like giving yourself the credit when you do go out of your way to do something even small because it truly, like for me, it creates momentum. It's like when I prioritize myself and it goes well, I'm like, you know what? Why don't I also like see about going for a walk every day for 20 minutes? Again, that would not have happened in the season that I was in because I don't think I physically could have like trusted anyone to take her for 20 minutes. But like now it's like I know that all of those things are creating momentum in a positive direction to help my overall being.
Totally. Well, the last thing I was going to say though is like this skill of like putting yourself on the list is it's like never going away. Like, so again, my kids are 10 and 11. This is still an issue. And I find, at the end of the summer, I'm starting to feel kind of like irritated and a little ragey. That's always like my cue of like, oh, I'm kind of being snarky today. What's happening? Oh, I'm not doing anything for myself. So now I'm like, okay, back to my schedule. When am I going to exercise? When am I going to see my friends? Like, right? This is constant. And so the faster you can just kind of get on this and accept that like this is my job to find these things for myself, the better because it's not going anywhere. It's going to be here in 5, 10, 30, 50 years. It's still kind of on us to find our own joy and our own care.
It just reminded me of, have you seen that trend on social media? I actually did one of the posts and because it resonated so much with me. It's like, I got I found myself getting so caught up in motherhood that I forgot that I'm also just a girl living for the first time too. And I was like,
Mm,
oh my God, it was, again, it's like those simple one-liners that you're like, wow, really, it's true. Like, it's so easy to get caught up in those other things without being like, this is my first time experiencing this too. This is my first time living in my 30s. And, you know,
yes.
yeah, I don't know.
Yes,
It
and
just made
life
me
is
think of
for
that
you
too.
to enjoy too. Like we are again, like we're not the
Totally.
camp counselors. Like, yes, we want our kids to have a great life, but like this is also our life and what would feel nice for you? Like how can you be kind of more intentional, more like in control, not in an anxious way, but more of like in the driver's seat of your
Yeah,
experience, your only experience here.
totally. Totally. So we could talk for hours. But
Yes.
let's maybe wrap this up with like, what would be your top 3 tips for realistic nervous system regulation when you are doing all the things all the time, when you're struggling with something like postpartum anxiety or intrusive thoughts or those feelings of rage? Like, what would be your top 3, like this, or top 1, maybe even? And maybe we've already
Oh
said it.
God. No, let me think that okay. And these are super simple. So I think like number one for sure is like knowing where you are, literally, internally, emotionally, mentally. So many of us are just like zipping through life. I was just away for a week and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know. Like, I haven't even checked in with myself. So mindfulness, but it's basically just like, how am I feeling? Like, where am I? What is my body doing? Like it's just like you could close your eyes, you could do it standing. We could do it right now, right? Nobody has to know. You're just checking in with yourself. So that practice every day, like where am I at? What do I need? Where am I at? What do I need? Biggest thing we need to do. I would say the other one, if I could add, would be turning off stimulation. Big one for like overwhelm, anxiety. Anxiety happens when we're dysregulated. Our nervous systems are so overwhelmed that it flips us into stress state. So we need to turn off the overwhelm. So it's like AirPods or like those loop earplugs or something.
Noise,
Get things
yes.
off your body that aren't comfortable. Turn the volume down, like shut off senses. Go in your room for 5 minutes in the dark, like whatever it is that you need. We need to like turn off the signals that are coming in everywhere.
I love that. And just to add to that super quickly, I don't remember who I learned this from, but so if it's you and I'm not giving you credit, I'm sorry. But someone once told me, and it changed so much for me, to back up against a wall and like cut out senses, like sensory input from as many areas as you can. So, like, literally back up against a wall, loop earplugs in, or noise canceling earplugs that still allow you to hear the kids, right? Because that could be an anxiety inducing if you're like, wait, I can't hear them. And what I would honestly end up doing was I would go against the wall and then I would like slide down the wall and sit so that my legs were also fully in contact with the surface area. And even just cutting out that one area of input where like now I'm only getting sensation from the sides and from what's in front of me was so helpful in those moments to like reset. So maybe even if that's helpful for anyone else. Okay. Oh my God, I could talk to you forever. So
I know.
let's
We need
so, can we just finish up and tell people where they can find you, where they can find your resources? We will link everything in the episode notes as well. But I think I know that people are going to want to continue being in your presence and using your resources. So tell
thank
us
you.
where we can find
Yeah,
you.
thank you. I think the best place would be on Instagram. So my handle is just at Kate Borsato. I'm always adding things and kind of changing things up. So I think that would be the best place to connect. I do have one main anxiety course. So if you're looking for something kind of self-paced, everything that I teach clients and that I find myself sort of using over and over again, I've put into one course. It's called The Calm Mom. So we could link that here too. And then if you happen to be in Canada or a provider in the motherhood space, I also run the Perinatal Collective, which is a whole other organization, but it's all about supporting folks with mental health in the early stages of all of this. So we can link those below, but I think like biggest thing would be Instagram. Come say hi. And just thanks for having me here. And Casey,
Really.
thanks for the beautiful conversation. It's always so nice to connect with you.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And I hope that this helps. I know that this will help someone out there that needs to hear it. So if that's you, just know that you're not alone and we've been there and you're going to get through it.
Mhm.